Okay, here we go. It looks like we're live now. And welcome back, everyone. This is our afternoon session of Big Portugal Live 2025. And we are delighted to have all of you back and to get started with, is Doug here? Is he back yet? Doug Johnson's presentation. I'm not sure if Doug's actually.
We can talk about how.
Oh, hang on. I got to mute my YouTube because we turned it up for.
Yes.
There we go. Technical difficulties.
Shut up.
Don't shut up. Can somebody? No, it's still on. See. Okay, so back again. We're here for our afternoon session. This afternoon, we are going to hear from Doug Johnson and most likely from Susan Lowell after that. If Susan's not able to make it at that time, we'll go right ahead to Nuna's presentation. We'll have a break. And then Steve, it will be you and Susan, depending, Susan first if she's here. Otherwise, we'll start with you and then go ahead.
And Susan has a copy of my video too, so she's ready to go with that if she gets there.
We've got Jason set up for the video.
Okay.
Anyways, here is Doug. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
We are going to mute ourselves and turn it right over to you. It's 20 after hour 2, so you have half an hour with Q&A.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I wish I was there. I love seeing Nuno in Portugal. When my family traveled there, and another time, I'm glad you all got to be together there. So the thing I just wanted to, I just decided instead of starting with a PowerPoint as I was working on it, I think there's some interesting things in there, which we might get to and some cool images and some videos that we'll all enjoy. I just thought, and Chris had mentioned focusing on movement some, so I just thought I would take it back to a movement exploration of these ideas. So the thing I've been thinking a lot about for a while is how to conceive of joints. And when I'm talking about joints, just to be clear, there are different kinds of joints in the body. Some are designed, like the pubic symphysis, to not have much movement at all, but I'm talking about the joints we usually think of as joints, such as the hip joint, that are really movement structures. And an essential, and there's an interface with the biotensegrity framework, which is something we all clearly believe 100% and really try to embody and understand, but also this background that I have with body mapping, which some of you I know have been exposed to, but just simply put, it's the idea that the image we have of ourselves, the internal map, or the technical term, it would be body schema, it affects how we move. And dealing with musicians, many of us, or not in this group, I don't think, but many people have a sense that that's the extent of the thumb, right? That the thumb is a short, stubby little thing. In fact, it's twice as long, and this joint is one of the most mobile joints in the body, along with the shoulder and the hip. And a lot of pianists in particular will, with the belief that that's their thumb, they will push out from there and then lock up their hand and wrist. So that shift in cognitively understanding that, but then actually shifting the visceral sense or the body schema, which is more of an internal understanding, can have really big effects. And I think we don't necessarily always say this out loud, but having somebody shift from a compression model of ourselves and our spine versus a tensegrity model by a tensegrity model, that affects our movement. It obviously affects how we approach somebody hands-on, but there's also, if I really believe that I'm a compression structure in my spine. I'm supposed to be upright, and my head's so heavy and all that. If I come over here, oh, my back is grabbing because my belief that that's going to be under strain. And when I have a sense that I'm really more like a cat, then all these positions require the same amount of energy, and then there's no stress or strain or shear in me moving into these different positions. So it's really a simple idea in a way, but also I think really profound how our schema, our internal map of ourselves in various ways affects how we organize ourselves and how we move because of the expectations that those maps have. And so taking that idea into how we picture joints in our body, how we picture the movements of joints. It stands to reason that the same thing will happen here. If we have a map that's inaccurate, it's gonna affect our movement in negative ways, or there'll be some limitations there. If instead our map is more in tune, in line with the actual structure, and certainly if it coincides with our understanding of the biotensegrity paradigm, then it's going to help our movement. And at one point, and I think if I had to point the single most significant point that I'm going to talk about, to me personally, the most impactful thing, is just the idea that I think so many of us, and certainly I was coming from this place, think about the joint as the articulation. And if you look up a definition for joint and articulation, that's one of them. It's a place where these two bones come together. And of course, knowing that these bones actually aren't jamming together, it kind of turns that a little on its head. But I just want you to consider on yourself, if you're thinking about your hip joint and thinking about movement, are you thinking about the joint somehow as this contact, or that I can admit Susan here. And so another thing that I've been thinking about and have had some discussions with people about is I feel like there's aspects, there are things you can find in a kinesiology book, for instance, that are true observations. There's things that at this point we're disagreeing with wholeheartedly, and I think it's really important. But also, one of the aspects is that joints are rotational structures. Joints move around, and if something's rotating, it's moving around it's moving around an axis, a relatively still point. And so, if you looking at the hip joint, just in a basic level, we have concave, convex structures. So there's a kind of congruence. And when I'm going to use a few words here, when I'm saying congruence, I'm not saying it's exactly the same shape, but without any question, this is a ball-like shape, and this is a cup-like shape. And the motions available at this joint are clearly related to that, connected to that relationship. And so we're going to just kind of dive in with some explorations really quickly. If I'm just with this model, and perhaps you have some models there. If you do, it would be great to get them out. If you have a tennis ball or any sort of racquetball, you can just kind of explore this with a ball in your hand. And you can also, you really don't even need toys to play. You can make it your fist and have that be a model you're exploring in terms of a ball and socket. But if I bring my attention to or map the structure as the meeting of these two elements, and I try to move, I'm basically trying to create this movement by pushing these together and kind of grinding them around. And it's not that pleasant, it's kind of awkward. And there is another option. If I focus instead on the axis of rotation, which can be just this one degree of freedom axis. But if you think about different axes all together, that just projects into the center of that ball, which, something we're very familiar with. A ball in a cup, it can spin in any way at all. And all of those motions are organized right around the center of the ball. Just an intuitive thing we understand. If the ball's rolling around, all the movements of that ball are organized around its center. And so if I bring my attention to that instead, we have a still point at the center of the head of the femur. And I like the idea a lot of node, N-O-D-E. There's Tom Fleming's definition of articulation or joint, where he talks about the joint being a node. There's some different meanings of node, and they all kind of come together nicely. And one of those meanings is the node is this interface or meeting place. I mean, in a sense, a train station is a nodal point where all these tracks meet. But there's also another meaning, which is wonderfully coincident to me, is in a sine wave. For instance, you have the place where the wave is neither going down or up. Those still places are the nodes. And if you play an instrument, I can show you in the piano in a minute, but there's the halfway point on the string. If you touch that, that's a place that will give you the harmonic, because that's where the wave is neither going up or down. So it's a still point. So if you think about the node as a meeting point or a still point where everything else is moving around, it's a really, to me, that's a really powerful image that isn't, once again, just a fanciful image, but it's relating to what's happening here. So if I focus on moving here around a still point in the center of the head of the femur, it's an utterly different experience of trying to move that by grinding that together. And there's another thing just to show you, and then we'll play around with this a little bit. There are three essential ways that these parts can move in relation to one another. Maybe we could think of some other things potentially, but one would be that in this case, the pelvis is still and the femur is moving. Another one would be the femur is still and the pelvis moves around the head of the femur. And then one more would be, well, the pelvis is moving and then the femur is moving in a different way, at a different rate, in different directions. So there's an independence. But the thing that's really cool about this, in terms of the node, if you would use this with a tennis ball, so the cup and the ball, as I'm spinning the ball, it's moving around its center. When I move my hand around the ball, I'm also moving my hand around that same center. So the nodal point for the cup's movement, so you can do it like this. So first of all, if I just move the head of the femur, all these movements I'm making, I'm really thinking about the ball staying in the same place and I'm moving around the center of that. But here, if I move the the pelvis, acetabular around that head of the femur, I can also take that away and picture where that cup is and how that moves around that center. And considering this really incredible thing that instead of this being a structure where everything is pushing together, there's space in there. And I think it's a pretty miraculous thing that this system that has this incredible stability can manage to facilitate and maintain that nodal point, that balance point, that center point, where all these movements are organized around that same center of the head of the femur. And if we're talking about the ecological psychology and the flocks of birds, I mean, this is clearly something that's happening so consistently that it can't be something that's just mediated from the brain. It has to be part of the tissues and the local responses. And as much as this can seem like a very secure, stable, solid structure, when we think about the parallel structure for the arm structure, well, I mean, the amount of processing, whether it's tissue processing or local nerve responses and things, there's nothing holding this together in the same way. There is a joint capsule, but you think about the rotator cuff muscles that are constantly working both for fine control of movement, but also for keeping that joint centrated. And if anybody's ever had impingements, reaching over their head, they know, I mean, you know the system fails at some point because that rises up and pinches your tendon. So once again, let's try this. We're going to try this, I think, with the shoulder first. But once again, if my attention is not on trying to keep these together, but instead sensing in to the head of the humerus and realizing that any movement I make of my upper arm, which I'm actually doing with my upper arm as I'm making this motion, is related to the center of that ball. And this structure, if you think about a joint as not an articulation, but as a movement structure. One of the things, well, I've got a slide that shows this, but just the words are interesting. To join, you're bringing two things together. And implied in that is an essential separation. We have two distinct elements, and the joint is where they come together. And it comes from, one of the things this comes from is joinery, carpentry, where they take two pieces of wood and bring them together to make a new solid structure. And people do it with great artistry, but implicit in that is that solidity and the fact that in carpentry, the fact that they're two separate things, but we're overlaying that model on ourselves. And I've heard this secondhand, and I hope I have this correctly, but Jaap van der Wal talks about, of course, as he always does, he loves to turn things on their head, but that the essential thing in the body is continuity. The essential thing is unity and continuity, yet there's a value that to create a discontinuity for the sake of allowing for and creating movement. So my understanding, he'll refer to this as a disjoint instead of a joint, which is a beautiful idea. So the essential thing is the continuity, yet there's created this disjoint or discontinuity to allow for movement. Tom Fleming's, I've seen that in his writings in ways as well, and we'll get to those definitions. But once again, we have this movement possible, we have this movement possible, which I think for a lot of us is something we're less likely to have consciously explored. But then there's a possibility that the shoulder blade, the scapula can move, and at the same time, the upper arm can move. And just notice the stillness that's at the center of all this movement. And that's one of the main sensory movement takeaways I hope everybody will have as we do this. So please, standing or sitting, and this one you can definitely sit, but if you put your put your hands over your shoulder. So what we're specifically then really doing is putting our hand over the head of the humerus there, and palpate in, so you can, let's make some different movements so we can just internally and externally rotate, and find one of the bumps on the bone there. And as you do this, just look for how, as you externally and internally rotate, that part of the outside of the ball is moving, and get a sense of the size of that bone, the end of that bone. And then, just like any sort of thing that's rotating around an axis inside of the thing, as a wheel, merry-go-round, a ball can be a one-dimensional or three-dimensional movement, interpolate into the center. One of the things about this is that I think for me is really important is that we can sense spinning, we can sense rotation. We can't sense movement. We can sense change in velocity, right? So if you're sitting still on a train, you're not moving in that inertial frame. Sitting here, I'm also not moving. I guess we can sense a lack of acceleration, but that's still all acceleration. It's all related to changes of velocity. So you have, when something's spinning, it's an acceleration, right? So any spinning in the body can be sensed, and it can be sensed consciously. We can access that, but certainly the body is taking this in all the time. So, and then go through some different movements in a fairly small range of motion. A thing that can be helpful to do is just make a little circle, draw a circle with the tip of your elbow without extra movement here. Change the direction, draw an infinity sign, and at some point, maybe sign your name in some different directions. And notice all those motions are happening related to, once again, the center of that ball being still, so that nodal point, and thinking that this whole tensional network is maintaining, supporting, and creating all those movements, not from an essential compression element, not like a wheel or a ball on the ground rolling, but with being suspended. And so listen for the stillness there, and then try bringing your arm back and forth a few times, and then see if you can, picturing the head of the humerus, you can keep your hand there, picturing the center of it. See if you can swing your whole body back and forth. So essentially it's a closed chain motion, except I'm creating that closed chain by keeping my arm in place. You can have this motion and also move this way. So lots of, and then these two things can happen together. So keeping my intention is the head of the humerus is going to stay in the same place. I'm thinking right into the center of it, sensing into the center of it, and having the arm move together. So you think about, well, just take on the other side as well. So we have these two nodal points in the center of each one of my shoulder joints, those movement structures. And so one of the things the body is doing then is maintaining the relationship between the node here, the still point here, and the still point here. And if I'm going to be reaching for something, and this is something, a very practical thing that I deal with my students all the time. Any motion happening at the end of the humerus is going to be some sort of curve or an arc. I'll make the exception just if it's the internal external rotation, but it's still a rotational movement. And it's because of intention of going somewhere in a straight line out here, it's terribly easy to end up trying to do that, which obviously is not possible. But you can picture at the piano, when people go up the keyboard, they so often push their elbow out to the side, essentially trying to move the whole bone in a straight line. And as soon as that happens, what it will do, it obviously can't make that motion, but what it will do is lock up the joint. And when movement is not available there, then communication through the whole system globally is significantly impaired. So let's just take it to the hip joints, and then let's encourage you to move around and explore this. And so same idea here, precisely. Bring your attention to the head of the femur and how we can move each one of these independently, one at a time or both together. And then you think if you're sitting, your sit bones, pivoting on the sit bones, which is another rotational movement from that axis of what's really below the chair, you're carrying those nodes around. You're carrying a node, a quiet place in each one of those femurs. So you can have total freedom and stillness related to this movement and to this movement, and any of these movements. And so essentially we're relating, by bringing our attention here, we can relate to movements from the places of stillness, which is something I think intuitively just makes sense. And so the relationship between that still place and the still point in this hip joint gives me a lot of freedom. If I reach out and push and stiffen to move, I've lost all that. But if my attention's on each one of these still points related, and we can take this through the body, you get the atlantoaxial joint. You can take the stillness and really perceive the axis of that and relate it to any one of these other nodal points. And then there's also the relationship, if you're dancing with somebody, there's a stillness that you're relating to into their center of balance. And you know, when we move, we're not tending to flop our head around. Our eyes are still, the sensory part of us are still, and so we're carrying those nodal points around. Let's get up and walk just a little bit and maybe come back and chat for a few minutes. But consider when you're walking that the movements at your pelvis and your hip joints is all related to the node in the head of your femur. So I'd encourage you to walk kind of slowly and definitely don't step out too far. And let's try one other thing. So if you're standing in place, I'm going to be balanced primary on my left side. I'm just going to internally and externally rotate. Once again, sensing in, not to the joints as the articulation, but sense into the node in the center of the head of the femur. And then after doing that, now I'm going to plant my right leg and I'm going to swing my pelvis around that same point. And then try swinging your pelvis a little bit around as you also internally rotate your hip joint. See if you can keep all that related to an absolutely still, quiet center. And you can relate it to your shoulders and your AO joint as well. Did you check your email?
Yeah, I checked, and unfortunately, I couldn't really.
There's another time this afternoon that opened up. So I'll email in a second. I'm done soon.
Doug?
Yes.
Sorry, I have a question. I'm not clearly understanding, or I'm misunderstanding your concept of a still point in the center of the joint. So first you explained that the head of the femur or the humerus was playing not from the center, for what I understood, but from the edges that do a different movement than from the center. So I was getting away from a center, and now you're talking about a still center point. I don't understand.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry, I probably wasn't clear. So the ball can be helpful that any way I move this ball in my hand, all of those motions, no matter what, will be that moving around the center of the ball. I don't need my hand there is another way of finding it. I can say, well, I'm going to keep the ball in the same place no matter how I move it. The center is in the center. And, you know, if I can look at the name there. The name's going to be moving around counterclockwise, and the opposite side's going to be following it around. So there's always movement at the edges, and those movements can follow around in different ways, yet the center is always still.
Okay, I was thinking about the concave part, not of the ball
Yes,
itself.
and then, exactly. So this is, let me just, I think it's helpful to consider this in a single degree of freedom. So this is a good mock-up of a pivot joint. So the forearm joints are also the atlantoaxial joint. So here, once again, there's three possible motions. One would be this ring moving around the stick. One is the stick moving there. And one is, they're both moving at the same time. But if I don't have the stick, let me see, there we go. I can make that same movement here, and the rotation of this hollow tube is still going around its center. But in this case, the center the center is not contained in that tube. It's just air. So that's the idea. And so the cup,
Thank you.
I can take my hand and move around. I can imagine I'm moving around the ball and it's still that same place. So then you get, I mean, I'm not a dancer, but I picture, there's that quietness and all this movement can happen, yet there's a stillness in relation to the center of balance, but also the joints talking to each other, and then the partner,
I like that.
Thank you. Doug.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, Doug, if the center then, if this is the long limb and this is the more centered to the body, if the still point is like the space at the center of the icosahedron.
I think it's more, I mean, the analogy that's really meaningful to me is the nodes in where the cables meet the struts. And so, the two femoral heads are pretty much going to stay the same distance apart. But one of the ways we have so much more freedom here with the shoulder blade movement is the head of this humerus and the head of this humerus there's a lot more flexibility in that structural relationship, but the body, we're still always managing the relationship between those two nodes. And even if they, like the tensegrity, even if you bring two nodes together so they touch, that's not the force consideration. It's still, the force distribution is still through the tensional compressional network. And so, I mean, the nodes, the relationship between all those nodes is inherent in the structure, in the tensegrity, as it is with us. And the more I move focusing on the stillness in those places, the more ease always comes in.
Okay, so I'm looking at my watch. We have a couple minutes left to bring some more comments to Doug. Questions, anybody? And then Susan will have you up afterwards. Go ahead, Doug.
Feel free to shout out. I'm just going to pull up a couple of these quick images, and can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so joinery, I don't have to go through all these things. I mean, that image, considering, comparing the wood joints and that is a joint. Whereas, I mean, yeah, calling that a disjoint can make a lot of sense relative to the other. And the idea that joints are movement structures. So here's the Tom Fleming's quote I just loved to read. I suggest that an articulation could be defined as a node where two or more tensegrities interact to alter a force trajectory. Appendages have discrete joints which possess various ranges of motion and degrees of freedom and allow forces to be transmitted across joints. I love that. I've been toying with one myself here. Joints are movement structures. Joint movement happens in relation to an axis of rotation or node, which is defined by the relationship of the convex concave elements in the joint. The function of the movement structure requires maintenance of the axis of rotation by the system. And this is in collaboration with AI. That's pretty powerful too. I like this. Within a biotenssegrity framework, joints are not simply mechanical hinges, but nodal regions where bones as compression elements articulate within a continuous tensional network. Convex concave relationships between articular surfaces still provide local guidance and constraints on movement, but these interactions are modulated by the surrounding tensional matrix of fascia, ligaments, and musculature. The node thus represents not only the geometric axis or axes of rotation, but also an emergent point of balance within the larger dynamic system, where motion is distributed and integrated across the whole structure. The biggest thing, I guess, is there's a term in English, an expression, which is red herring, which is a funny term, but it basically is something that's a distraction. And I really feel that the thought that this is the joints is a major distraction. Because then we get into, well, it's not a fulcrum because it's slippery. It's like, well, it's not even touching, and that's not what we should be focusing on anyway, to my mind. It's that the whole thing, its reason for existing is to establish the axis of rotation, or that quiet spot that things move around. That's a totally different focus.
Okay, thank you, Doug. I see Bruna nodding. Did you want to say anything?
No, just
No.
very, very nice. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You got it.
And now, thank you so much. Susan is here. Doug, I think this is a conversation that will continue on because there's a lot there. And I still need more learning on it. Susan, hi.
Hi,
How are you doing?
Oh,
I am good. Happy
And
to
ready? It looks like you're ready to present. So
I am. I do like the idea of that the still point inside the center of the tensegrity, and I think that maybe that's a different scale level to look at things on. I'm not sure, but that would be fun to play with too.
yeah, that was how I was thinking of it. Oh, back to the wrong thing. And now I'm thinking of nodes and I'm trying to realizing I was understanding what Doug said was a bit different than what Doug was talking about.
Well,
So
and Doug was talking about like 2 points on the outside so that you could trajectory into a node, 2 nodes on the outside. And I was looking at what Bruna was doing earlier with the chest and the sacrum, and
yeah.
there are 2 nodes.
yes, I had the same feeling.
Okay, very good. Well, why don't we move on? Susan, poor Susan, is the only one that I specifically asked to present on the history of biotensegrity. And that is, of course, because it's been 50 years since Steve first brought together the idea of tensegrity as an explanation for what he'd been looking for. And Susan, I see you as the person who you've done so much study, and I know you're continuing to work on that. So I'm very excited to see what you're going to be sharing with us today. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. And it may be very different from what you were expecting. I don't.
That's okay. This is good. Surprises are always good. I'm gonna
Yeah.
mute myself now.
But you can see my screen okay, yes? And you can hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, this is something I've been working on, over the years, bit by bit. And so I'm just going to bring you in to where I am on some of this research, because you may know someone or have found something that can answer some of my questions. It's all about me, guys. Anyway, so this is, we of course are celebrating today this idea of Steve having this eureka moment at the Needle Tower in 1975. But anyone who's seen my book, Everything Moves, where actually I start back in ancient Egypt with a Jed column the column of Osiris, the god of Osiris, whose column was a spine, but also a building column, and there are different visual artifacts that show you that. But here, some dates you probably know. Borelli's De Motu Animalium, 1680. Jorgensen's the exhibit in Moscow in 1921. The 2 summers when Snelson and Fuller met at Black Mountain College, and in the intervening winter, Snelson created his first tensegrity. And now, from 1975 to now and beyond, we are part of the history and the early history, I think, of biotensegrity. Everything we've been doing in the last however many years you've been a part of this, everything Steve's been doing for the last 50 years. And actually, we know from the Everything I Know series, Steve's journey started way before that. I've got an estimate here of, it's 1837, I think, is when Froebel invented kindergarten. 1900, Buckminster Fuller would have been about 5 years old, attended a Froebel kindergarten. So this is a lot of stuff that I think you probably already know. Today, I want to focus on the 50 years roughly between 1949 and 1975. Okay, so what do we know? And that's what I've been looking at. And when you're studying history, there are gaps, and then you find this rich well of information that fills some gaps, but not others, or may create new ones. And so in 1975, not only did Steve have his eureka moment, but that is the same year that Ron Kirkby presented and published the paper, The Probable Reality Behind Structural Integration, How Gravity Supports the Body. And it's also, if I have it right, the same year that Fuller published Synergetics. So that makes 1975 an interesting kind of year in terms of these convergences. Now, this paper, if you haven't read it, it's freely available online. And my last slide, I've got all the resources so you can freeze it later and get them. Published in the Bulletin of Structural Integration, it is surprisingly sophisticated, and it is a mystery to me how, because when Steve had this moment, he got in touch with Snelson, he started building models. Everybody's going to correct anything I have wrong here, and I'm counting on the community to do that. And he also started talking about it, and he met a guy who was familiar with Rolfing and the Rolfing community, who said, oh yeah, they're looking at that in the Rolfing community. So what happened to the Rolfing community? Why weren't they at the forefront of this movement to understand biotensegrity? I don't know, but I love this quote from the paper. We see and understand what our categories allow us to understand and see. And in the dedication at the top, at the introduction, he dedicates it to Michael Salveson, his teacher, who would say to him, it's like a tensegrity structure. And he hadn't heard what that was. He didn't know what that was. So what did Ron Kirkby do? He started building them and trying to understand them and feeling them and moving them. And the other thing about this paper is, on a different website from where you can access the paper, you can access 2 recordings, and I'm giving you in the references the names of both of them. And you can hear the discussion that they're having when he presents this paper to the group. And it is amazing. Dr. Rolfe saying, he's commenting on how she talks about this, the psoas lengthens as it shortens. I think what she was trying to get at there was that there was something nonlinear going on with the musculature. They're clearly aware of Fuller because she talks about how his book is coming out, and they talk about maybe getting a couple of vans together and driving to Colorado from California to hear Fuller speak. And Kirkby talks about the second law of thermodynamics, the concept of tuning the cables with turnbuckles, if he could do a different kind of model. He talks about the value, if they can figure out how to do it, of mathematizing the concept. And he says there's a whole department of, area of kinesiology in the library that would just be done away with if we can mathematize this concept. And I think our recent superstability paper links to that. And he also talks about how collagen would be an intriguing substance for the cables because of different properties it has for changing. So my question is, what put Ida Rolf onto tensegrity? What got that linkage? Was it, and this is her graduating from Barnard in 1916, so she would have been about 20. I love the picture. And here she is working on someone at Esalen. Both Buckminster Fuller and Ida Rolf taught at Esalen. Did they meet? I don't know. Did their students meet? I don't know. We know that Michael Salveson was talking about tensegrity. Probably other Rolfing students were as well. Tom Myers talks about, I'm going to forget the guy's name, but Tom studied with both Ida and with Bucky. So I want to hear, what he knows about that history, but I haven't asked him yet. Anyway, so those are some of my questions that I'm trying to fill in. How did the Rolfing community come to start studying biotensegrity, and why did they kind of drop it? And I've been in conversation by email with Shaya Gottlieb, who did the scientific editing, reviewed Graham's book for the Rolf Institute publication, the structural integration publication and stuff, and how he feels like Graham's book really brings everything full circle. But I don't know why, for example, the Fascia Research Congress this year had biotensegrity, but in years previous, no. What happened there? How did that ball get dropped? Okay, the second thing I'm going to talk about is a paper called The Physical Principles in the Construction of Regular Viruses by Casper and Klug. It's a 1962 paper. I stumbled on it years ago. I read it. Most of it's completely over my head. But this is where they came up with the term self-assembly. There's one we all know. And they came up with a concept very important to virology called quasi-equivalence. It's really considered a landmark paper. It does not mention tensegrity. Don't let me forget to come back to that. But it does mention Buckminster Fuller in the acknowledgments, and it uses a picture of one of his geodesic domes. So they were trying to understand the structure of viral shells, and they would make all kinds of models, and it wasn't quite working. This idea of quasi-equivalence came as in inspiration from the domes. And if you look at this dome, you're seeing largely hexagons. But every so often, like there's one right there, there's a pentagon instead. And you've maybe heard Steve talk about how you need to have that five-sided shape in order to make the curves. And that's the quasi-equivalence, that it's not all hexagons, that you mix in some slightly different shapes in order to get the curvature in the viral shell happening. Okay, but my question was, how did these scientists, and these are not lightweights. I mean, Aaron Klug is later a Nobel Prize winner. He did postdoc work with Rosalind Franklin, Caspar, and maybe also with Watson of Watson and Crick. Caspar worked with either both Watson, definitely worked with Franklin. How did they meet Fuller? How did that happen? A separate but not unrelated question is from this article in 1961. Here is Buckminster Fuller talking about tensegrity in biology. Okay, he's talking about, and you can freeze this later and read the whole thing, closest packing, a pattern of, oh, and I've got my image covering the quote, so I'm not going to completely read it, but you can see how he's talking about local bone structuring, tissue, animal flesh, in every way, advantage of the same structural strategy principles employed by nature in all biological formulations. He's talking about geodesic tensegrity. So that's 1962, but then it's before that, in 1961, that Fuller mentions biology and tensegrity. And if anybody knows of a reference earlier than that, when Fuller's talking about biology, that specifically, please help me. I would love to know. I am not a great Fuller scholar. So those are two of my main questions. And here's the thing. Just in the last couple of years, I found at least part of the answer. Gregory Morgan has written a book chapter and an article. And again, in the last slide, you can see this all. He's also authored this. I don't know. Can you guys see it? Maybe you can see the whole cancer virus hunters. I've got to find a way to hide this on my screen so I can see better. Okay, that's better. Okay. So Morgan finds out that this article was in the London paper, The Observer, in 1959, reporting on Finch and Klug, that's Aaron Klug from the previous article, on the polio virus. And they had gone out and bought a bunch of ping pong balls and assembled them. And this was in the paper. And an artist, a Scottish artist named John McHale, who is a member of this wild independent group, who is the guy who coined the term pop art, he saw the article. Okay. And he was intrigued by this. And this artistic group was into finding different inspirations for their work. And you see there, McHale was awarded a scholarship to study with Josef Albers at the design department, Yale University, August 1955. Where was Albers before that? Black Mountain College. Why did Kenneth Nelson go to Black Mountain College? He wanted to study with Albers because Albers had been at the Bauhaus. So again, this thread of art, these different interweaving threads coming together. When John McHale went back to England, to Scotland, wherever he was living, but went back to Europe, he brought all these US magazines with him. And that's what the pop art is. It's popular media being used in art. That's part of where that comes from. And that's an example of one of his works. But McHale was also into Buckminster Fuller. Okay. And he wrote a book as part of this. This was part of a series, Makers of Contemporary Architecture. And he wrote a book on Fuller in 1962. And McHale wrote to the scientists and arranged for them to meet Fuller. And that happened in 1959. And there's not a lot of documentation about the meeting. This is just a fun thing, another thing from the independent group. Those of us studying biotensegrity are familiar with growth and form. And that was the kind of thing that they would use for inspiration for their art exhibits. Here is the 1956 Madrid International Union of Crystallography meeting. And there's Francis Crick, there's Don Casper, there's Aaron Klug, there's Rosalind Franklin. These guys are heavy-hitting scientists, right? Watson and Crick, other Nobel Prize winners, all working together. They all knew each other. And here's what we all have in common. My scientist friends who don't think you're scientists. What's this guy doing? This is Don Casper on the floor of Buckminster Fuller's apartment in Boston. Maybe that's a Fuller grandchild there. And what's he doing? He's playing with models. And what's he doing here? He's got his models. And for 10 years, he went over in the summer and worked with Klug, and they worked on this idea of tensegrity. In that 1962 paper, Morgan tells us they had correspondence saying that they agreed at that time that tensegrity was what was going on in terms of viral structure for the viral shells. They agreed that they were tensegrity structures, but they had so much information, they were going to write a second paper and put tensegrity in that. That paper, Donald Casper wrote in 1981, so I don't feel that bad about procrastinating the way I do. I'm among the greats. Anyway, so those are some of my notes from history of the early history of biotensegrity. And here is a screen you can freeze on later that has the main resources. The images came from the Morgan papers. So thank you very much.
Hold that there for a moment, Susan, or will you take a screen? Will you take a screenshot and put that up into the Zoom chat for people, please? Or put it back up. I'm
yes.
going to do it. Oh,
It's not-
why is my computer
I can
not?
take a photo.
Oh, got it.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, I am going to share that to the chat because I am sure that everybody would like. Oh,
Oh,
Miranda, thank
Oh,
you.
Sorry, I was over time.
No, nothing to be sorry for. That was fascinating. And, you know, I have not heard the detail that you're bringing. And I think that
Oh, and
One
I
of the
left
things-
so much out. There are so many good stories in these articles.
well, maybe we have a tea party coming up sometime in the future if you're interested. One of the things that really kind of jumped out for me was that so much of Western academia and science is siloed. You know, you're studying this, and what you showed us is the interweaving of different disciplines that is really coming to life again, not just in what we do. And this is something you say to us very frequently, and consciously cultivate. And we did this with the tea parties. Anybody can come. And what is emerging now? We see Mariana and Doug working together with Doug's student. We see Bruna and Eileen and, you know, Mike coming together, Mike Olean with his, we've got a model here, creating these kits so that we can build our tensegrities more quickly. And it's an
Yeah.
exciting, it's exciting.
Well, and there's resistance always. Well, with some people, there's resistance when you say, okay, now we're going to build triangles. And I love the closed kinematic chains that you did earlier, Chris.
Thank you.
You know, there's all this resistance, but guess what, guys? That's you being a scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of how Aaron Klug got his Nobel Prize. Do not take this lightly, what you're doing when you're building these models.
Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Let,
so
let me put in a word or two. Uh,
yeah,
just first of all, some of that history is fascinating and stuff that I didn't know about. But I did know Philip Wenger, who was the guy I linked into Ralphing with.
Oh, and it's Peter Melchior, however you pronounce that. That's the guy that Tom Myers credits
All right. Well,
with
okay.
making and Steve with you, even though he knew Fuller and he knew Rolf, it was your work that helped him really put it together. Sorry.
yeah, well, what happened was that, I got it through Wenger, who introduced me to the Ralphing people. And so I got an article in the Ralphing magazine. The problem that Ralph had was that her basic model was a vertically alignment model. Everything
Yeah.
had to line up, in a gravity field. And in her concept, tensegrity only worked when it was properly aligned in this body organization. And it's supposed to be like tensegrity, but not exactly. Fuller in synergetics, there are lines right through the book. This may have application in biology. And
Yeah, but that's 1975. That's after.
1975, that's after, but it's still, this brings in from all of the previous stuff. My understanding from Wenger was that uh, Ralph and Fuller did meet sometime in Philadelphia. There was a point when they overlapped living, both of them were living in Philadelphia and they overlapped. That was what I got from Wenger. No personal knowledge of it, but that's from my bit. But yeah, you're right. I have no idea why Ralphie didn't take the ball and run with it because,
I,
that's really, really was hot.
I'm
But then I moved it in from this abstract thing to more direct line of it. But certainly I depended on all this stuff. I read Dotsy Thompson over and over again to get that piece into it. Um, so yeah, they all sort of link together.
I'm curious to know Steve and Doug and Mariana, anybody who wishes. Steve, I heard you say the problem was that Ida Rolf was working with this image of straight lines. We know that many people have found success with Rolfing, and we, all of us here, are using biotensegrity to understand what's going on. There's often these discussions about, okay, how do we take the success of this work? I'm curious to hear your words to describe not what she says was happening, but through the lens of these 50 years of thinking this way. How would you describe what's going on
Yeah,
within this
the
practice?
history of medicine has been the successes of medicine have often been doing the right thing
Hold
for
on,
the
can we
wrong reason.
spotlight Steve?
He
Yeah.
was,
Yeah, it's often been that medicine has done the right thing for the wrong reason. So just because they give you a reason why something works doesn't mean that that's the reason it works. But if they tell you something works, it works. It's just they don't understand why, and they'll make up some reason about it. My favorite book here, and one of Susan's favorite books, is a book I have on actually dermatology, or I know it's the first book written on orthopedics at the turn of the 18 and 1900s, at the turn of that century, and it has 3 pages describing the treatment of rickets at that time. And the last paragraph is to treat rickets, you give them Norwegian cod liver oil for it. And it's the phosphorus in the cod liver oil. Well, of course, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the vitamin D in the cod liver oil. And it worked because it was vitamin D in cod liver oil. It had nothing to do with the reason they gave the cod liver oil. But that's the history of medicine. I can tell you the same thing went on with germ theory and with surgery and all these kind of things. They often did the right thing for the wrong reason, and you do what works. Um, so it's that I've sort of done that. I've now put the reason behind it that's more logical as far as I can see.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Rather than continuing on with this line, I'm going to invite Jason up because I saw you had your hand, Jason.
Susan, what was the question you were asking? Did Buckminster Fuller refer to by the
Did he refer to
viruses?
integrity in biology prior to 1959?
Prior to 1959. Okay.
Right, prior to McHale introducing him to the virologists.
Mhm.
When Morgan talks about how Fuller was intrigued by this application of the geodesic domes and the tensegrity idea to virology.
Yeah.
Before that, is there anything from Fuller applying his theories to biology?
Right. He has a 1965 essay that refers to Casper and Klug, but I don't know.
Right, so that's after 1959. And the quote that I gave is 1961. So the question is, before he met Casper and Klug in 1959, before Don McHale introduced them, had Fuller thought about applications in biology? Just maybe yes, maybe no. I'm just interested in knowing. Thank you.
Yeah. According to Ed Applewhite, who I spent some time with, I asked him, was Fuller interested in biology at all? And he said no. But of course, Fuller had wide-ranging things and wrote about different things, and they come through and go out the other side very quickly.
Yes.
So as I said, even though Applewhite wrote the book with Fuller on synergetics, he doesn't remember those lines that I picked up on right through the book.
Yeah. But it's right there in that 1961 article. So.
Susan, thank you so much. Amazing. I got chills in the presentation. I think we are a part of this whole timeline, and it's amazing to think about
right?
it.
There we are, part of this network, this thread, this family tree of investigators, or this, whatever you want to call it, endless web of investigators. And we're linking to all these really amazing, I mean, we know we're linking to artists. We know we're linking to amazing movement people. But these are Nobel Prize winners.
Yeah,
Don't get more validation in science than that.
very special. Thank you so much. Now we had the opportunity to apply this in body. We have Nuno to facilitate thinking, expressing. Nuno Guzmão, please.
So we're going to move. Yes. Assim, tá bom? Is it okay? Yeah, yes. Am I okay here?
Yes.
Further away, closer?
I think we can go a little bit.
We don't see the face on the front camera. So go back a little bit. There. Yes. There we see.
Okay.
You're too tall.
Sorry?
You're too tall, she said.
Yes. So, I'm going to do a presentation based on what I like to do with this knowledge that I've been learning with you all, which is to get some pieces of information and try to see where in my practice I see the expression of those informations coming from this knowledge. Namely, after watching Steve's video, his new video that he's going to talk about later, present later, I heard what Steve had said many times before, but I heard it again. And this time, some parts that caught my attention, namely that our muscles, if they were responsible to move ourselves as they are tensional springs, they will need a fixed point to move us. And the only fixed point we have while we're standing or sitting is a lower fixed point, is down. So any action of those muscles would pull us down. And that for me was very striking. It shouldn't have been, but it was striking because it is logical. It seems logical. So why are we contracting? Are we working out and trying to work muscles to contract, to shorten? So I'm going to use my current words from my profession as a personal trainer and Pilates teacher. Deliberately using the wrong words to be used in a biotensegrity meeting, but just to highlight the current state of affairs, I don't know if you say like that, in this profession, because I think it's important that we speak from experience, from reality. So Steve explains that if we cut soft tissue, a muscle, it will, the two parts that are separate, they will separate apart. It means that the tissue is under tension. This is clear. So muscles work as tensional springs. Any tensional spring needs one fixed support to be activated, or two fixed supports. And if we are standing, as I said, we have the only fixed support on the ground. So if a muscle would contract, it would pull us down. As I was teaching my partner, he's a dancer, I always try to see this expansion of the body while I work in my Pilates with the people I work with. This expansion, this action of giving space to the body, instead of what I learned from traditional Pilates, which was to build a strong center, so to contract everything. Now with my biotensegrity information, I changed not the exercises, but what I ask from, what I suggest my clients to do while they exercise. And I suggest always for them to search for spaces. While he was, my partner, lying down on the reformer, which is has a carriage, I think most of you know, with some springs attached. When you, and a bar in the front, you're lying down belly up. When you push that bar, you push the carriage out, and the springs that are connecting the carriage to the frame, they tense, and we can get shrunk, we can get compressed, or we can be informed by that structure that we can either resist or go again. So the machine, the equipment can inform us that we can, instead of, if we know the possibility, instead of shrinking, we can expand. So I was asking him to expand while he was stretching his legs, And during that motion, I also asked him, because he was very flat on his ribs, I asked him to kind of puff his ribs while he was going up and bring the shoulders against so to help the direction of the movement. So to lift the shoulders, to lift the rib cage, to puff this upper part as if he was creating an upper support for the motion. And he said, well, so this is the ballon. This is the ballon, which is a ballet term. I didn't knew that term, and I said, okay. So what is the ballon? Oh, the ballon is what we do in the classical ballet. Some schools teach it like that and give that name, which is the lift that they create to have that sense of easiness and uprightness that we want to see in a dancer. We don't want to see a sloppy dancer doing it's impossible to do a pirouette like that or something. So I work with a ballon. And I related that to what I heard Steve saying, that we don't have a lower support. We don't have an upper support. We just have a lower support when we're standing. But there in my practice, I was creating and I was insisting in creating an upper support, or the sense of an upper support. So this is what we can perceive. And this is to say that even if and in my work I see it a lot, even if I know that there is no physical upper support, because we don't, unless we are hanging from something, which happens not very often, even if we don't have the upper support, we can sense as if there was an upper support, and we can ask for that metaphor, which gives us the lightness and the uprightness sensation. The explanation for that, in biomechanical terms, it's impossible to get, but probably in biotensegrity terms, it's very feasible to have an explanation for that action that we're going to try. Okay. I'm not going to give the explanation by biotensegrity terms. We're going to sense it or try to sense it. You can be sitting down or standing. And by standing or sitting down, you can just sense yourself, how you stand on the floor, how your sense of standing upright. And you can sense the sense of weight in your legs, peso nas pernas, the heaviness or less heaviness in the sole of the feet, at your hips, maybe on the base of the spine. And you can now try to build a sense of a balloon, filling up a balloon inside your chest, all around. You can even lift the shoulders. You can lift the rib cage here. Okay, so you can lift the shoulders, really lift the shoulders, so that you can allow the rib cage to come up, as if you're doing an in-breath with all your chest, but you stay in the in-breath attitude, okay? You can out-breath without dismantling this structure. So you breathe out, but you stay with this sensation of lifting up. So after you get this sensation in yourself, can you go again to the dismantling of the structure and go to the old sense of weight on your legs, maybe lumbar spine, the sole of your feet, and put the balloon sensation or in-breath sensation and see how the weight changes. You can go from one to the other, or there. And you can try to walk. You don't need to walk very far, but just to walk with the sensation of having that suspension from above that allows you to move under the suspension place. And you can change between letting the suspension hang, fall, and you see what you see in your sensation as you walk, and then you put again the lifting action. You can use the shoulders, you can use the rib cage. It doesn't have to be beautiful. You're not, well, some of you are ballet dancers, but you don't need to have that thing. But you can mimic as if you're hanging up from that shoulder girdle area and upper chest. And then you can let go again. And you can stop. And tell me if any of these words that I mentioned, of these sensations, make sense in your experience or not. In what sense does it make sense? What you describing it in terms of not biotensegrity or biomechanical, just you're a person sensing and you use the vocabulary you can use to describe what you just sensed. What was the feeling?
I think you just feel more lighter and more, maybe not you. I felt lighter and more expansive, and with that freer to move.
I felt I just needed some wings to fly. Like feeling light.
I'm felt like I'm hanging. I leave all the perception in my not the upper body, the down body, yeah, and I could distribute more the sensation of movement, like hanging a little more, not fixed in the floor.
Okay.
I have two things happen with this suspension. I get the image almost that I'm with floating balloons, like a kid's balloon. And in the first time, I get the sensation of space, and remind me manipulation that we have in osteopath, that we give a little bit of push on the diaphragm. Was my first sensation. But when I dropped, I get the feeling of my body a little bit more root in with the sensation of ground. So my sense was, in the moment I felt I get the tension, like, whoo, but when I finished, I felt my body a little bit more condensed, grounded. It was a nice feeling.
Thank you. Yes, I think you described what I experienced too. Does anyone want to comment? Does anyone online want to comment anything? You can unmute and speak. Yeah. Just say whatever you feel like to say, or I can add some more things. In this experience, in my clients, the more, let's say, tight clients that I have, mainly men, but also women, if I ask them when they stand or when they're sitting to lift one leg up, they don't stay. They sink down when you lift a leg. So these also contradicts or adds to what I'm saying, but helps to reinforce what Stephen Level was saying about having a lower support. As I bring up a leg, I use more my lower support, and the lower support brings me down. It doesn't bring me up. I need to make an effort to come up. Yes.
My question is, do you think we can work in different perspectives? Because my feeling was when you talk about this example that if I imagine that my knee is floating and my other is giving the contrast, I have the same feeling that I did with my ribs or my head. Do you think we can use that like in different perspective, not only in the upper body, but in what is, because the feeling is very good, the foot going down and the other one just getting space floating. Do you think we can use in different perspectives?
I think so. I just think that if the person has no availability to use that opposition of the downward force of the pressing down to resume it up, the resultant force, the usual resultant force, by the way, we use our bodies most probably, it's a going down. You need to be very aware to be able to use that anchor to lift from. Yeah. I just want to, if you to finish, yeah, Camilla. Loved it. The legs walk on their own, effortless, when the whole body is buoyant like this. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Camilla. I wanted to give this example, not, yeah, because it's something that we can explore if we want to, but to show that in my process within biotensegrity, by having new knowledge, new lenses, I'm going to use a word that I love from Susan, I can inform my practice in a different way. The practice is the same, but this is a way of informing my practice by getting a little phrase or a little idea taken from an authority, someone that I respect, Stephen Levin. I understand in a different way what I was perceiving, a muscle contraction, a lower support, a tensional spring that needs a support. The support is down. What can I do with that within my practice? How can I inform my practice using that new knowledge? And we can all do that, I think. And it is, I don't think it's difficult. It's just allowing ourselves to grab that knowledge. And if that speaks to me, to my nature, in my practice, I can embody it and I can sense it and I can explore it to color my practice in a different way and the way I see another person move. This was my idea of the presentation. Chris?
Do we need to move on or? So anyways, thank you, Nuno. Can I just add where I go with this? And that is, oh, sorry. Hello, everybody. So you stay there so I look like I could see someone, please. I'm so bossy. So what came up for me also is the auxetic nature of tensegrities of our bodies. So as we could root through our feet, and again, the conventional lens, the what we've learned, our cultural lens, is often impacts us in so many ways. So I'm thinking of a compression, a tower, and tapping into the feet might make me feel heavy. And it might make me feel like this, but the balloon or ballon is also for me a sense of remembering the tensegrity and feeling that expansion can come in all directions. So I could find the lightness up here from the feet, or I can just find the lightness down there from here. And I haven't explored it so much, so I don't know But I'm sure that other things like it doesn't need to be feet and shoulders, like Bruna said, but I don't have that from, a long personal exploration of it at this point.
Very good, very good. You can also use your head, use a hook on your head from toes, from feet to the base of your skull or the top of your skull. Your imagination goes.
And what Bruna does, she puts her hands on your head and put a little bit of weight.
Or use the fabric.
And I also then feel my body wanting to spring back into this. It's just this play.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have the feeling, there is something that sometimes we do with the fabric. We put as a cocoon, so I enter in the cocoon and I invite this sensation of expand and condense. And then I start to play, like lifting the shoulder and down. Is similar sensation that you are bringing, because every time the shoulders goes up, it's almost that I've had the sense of getting more volume, but in the same time, I had the external forces bringing this idea and this sensation. So very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically I think the options are infinite. If we play with, as you say, with imagery that you play so well with, we can, if we know and we allow ourselves with a different way of knowing how we move, how we are structured, what the possibilities are, allows us for more use of a different kind of imagination.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nono. Any last words before we move on? Okay, so now on our schedule, if you want to take a 2-minute, 3-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute brio break, it would be a good time. And as we do so, Jason is here, or we would like someone to please queue up Steve's video. And I'm not sure if we decided who it was going to be. Jason, are you able to do that? Thank
As
you.
long as it's not me.
So I believe that that this video is the inspiration behind Nuno's explorations.
We can come back by the hour, then people have like 6 minutes.
Okay, we're going to take a 6-minute break. I will leave the Zoom on, or is that a problem for the YouTube Live?
No, I think it is.
Should I take it off YouTube?
I think 6 minutes, that's fine. We are going to.
Okay, so anybody who's wanting to be a star can come and take the mic and talk to our YouTube audience. And
Or we can sing.
Doug, yeah, we can. Oh, I think Doug had to go back to class. Okay, thank you. We're going to mute ourselves here.
Grace, I'm gonna find the bubbles and I'm gonna play the bubbles while you're coming, okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Bruno, are you there?
Jason, do you need something?
I just wanted to ask, do you want me to test the video play and share screen while we're waiting so it runs smoothly?
Yes, please.
Okay.
É a mesma sensação daqui, tu aqui não cresces por trás, tu aqui cresces por dentro. Cresces aqui, cresces por dentro, estás ali, cresces por dentro, estás aqui, cresces por dentro. Não queres é.
You just need to put the sound when you share. There is a button on the right. So maybe you can start again, and when to put to share, put also to share sound. You need to leave the sharing and come back to the sharing. Yes.
It's reflection with internal suspension, without collapsing. It's not a no, it's a if I twist with I find the lines of easiness inside of it.
I'm
Where
here.
share the audio from?
From the computer. So share. And there is a button on the right.
Okay, got it. Okay, content only, share sound. Okay. Try this again. All right. This is why it's good to test these things.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Audio share.
I think it's just to press the button.
If you guys want to.
We have 2 minutes.
Okay.
But
If you prefer to play it on your end, that's totally fine.
no, that's I think you got it.
No.
All right, so I am screen sharing, and now I'm going to start the video.
Okay.
Let me help a little bit, because if you open the video before sharing the screen, before you share the screen, click the button of share audio and then find the window where the video is. So you don't have to share your whole video. And that way we're gonna see it like big.
All right, so the video's open.
Okay, so when you
now I'll do the
share
screen with the share sound.
Share sound and look for the windows before sharing.
All right.
Yeah, no, there you're sharing your whole window. It's okay, it works, but you have to make it bigger so you're covering your window, your desktop.
EMG signal.
Now it's
Muscles
playing.
are the prime movers of an organism.
Perfect.
Good. Yeah, it's good.
Now, if you believe all that,
now can I mute myself?
I have a bridge that I like to
Let's
sell
try.
you. There's none of
It's
that.
perfect, Jason.
It's perfect. Yeah.
And why?
Thank you, Mariana.
Because you are dealing with collagen. And collagen is not one of your usual states of matter, solid, liquids, or gas. It's something altogether different.
Okay, I'm just going to stop the share. Leave it ready to play.
There's a fourth form of matter, soft matter, common to just about all biologic matter. And I'm still talking.
Yeah.
I won't shut up.
Perfect. Chris, we are good here.
Okay, do you want to introduce it?
No, please.
Do you have the mic? Yeah, go.
Go ahead.
We like to hear other people's voices too. No. Go introduce Steve, please. Yes, that's right.
This is green, not blue. Okay.
Yes, it's okay. It needs spotlight.
Hello, so welcome again. We have Dr. Steve Levin, which is a pleasure I've never thought of presenting you. And I think you never thought that I would present you. So this is really a pleasure to have you presenting your new video, a premiere of your ideas expressed so well and so joyfully, in such a scientific, joyful way, not heavy and yeah. Thank you very much for being here, Steve.
Well, thank you very much. This video is the most recent of a series, and you really, they build on each other so that one talks about the other one, which talks about the other one, so that to get the full concept of what's going on, you really have to see them all, and they can be mixed and matched. This one is the most recent one on muscles that sucks in concepts I've talked about frequently, but really until I put this video together, I didn't have it quite straight as I think I've now been able to present it. So I think Jason's going to set this off, and we can answer any questions afterwards. Um, so Jason, go ahead and show the picture. Are you there?
Yes, he's doing the job.
He's working on it.
Thank you, Jason.
So let's talk about muscles. Here's what we know about muscles. Muscles function by shortening or lengthening. One muscle does one thing to one joint. Muscles can pull you up as going from sitting to standing. Muscles work as agonists and antagonists. Muscles are either on or off. EMGs can tell you when a muscle is active. A muscle is only active when there's an EMG signal. Muscles are the prime movers of an organism. Now, if you believe all that, I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you, as none of that is true. And why? Because you are dealing with collagen. And collagen is not one of your usual states of matter, solid, liquids, or gas. It's something altogether different. Solid, liquid, and gases behave in very predictable ways, but there is a fourth form of matter, soft matter, common to just about all biologic matter, and to quote the soft matter physiologist, biology is soft matter come alive. We will fill in the details of this later as we go along, but for now let's go back to our list. Let's start with muscles being on or off. Part of my misspent youth was as a surgeon, often treating patients who are fully anesthetized. Under anesthesia, everything is at a resting state. There is no pain response or voluntary muscle contraction. But if you cut any soft tissue, skin, fascia, muscle, tendon, the edges pull apart, indicating they are under tension. Muscles are tension springs and can only pull, creating an internal force. When a bone breaks, the edges overlap, indicating they are under compression, and they can interact with an external force. The overlap is with non-weight bearing, and even under deep anesthesia. So it is not only gravity that compresses bone, but also muscle. The entes, where muscle attaches to bone, is never on the ends of bone, but always along its shaft. Muscles that pull up counter muscles that pull down, and they compress the bone. So as muscles pull in, bone pushes out. Bones are very springy, much more so than tendon or cartilage. And some of that springiness comes from the muscle tone that stiffens the bone and makes it more springy. As we have already noted, even under deep anesthesia, there is intrinsic tension in muscle, what has been referred to as resting muscle tone. This is a stress-strain curve for usual non-living construction matter. The area under the curve is the potential energy stored in the system. Note that without stress, there is no strain or deformation of the structure, no stored energy. The green curve is the stress-strain curve of biologic matter. The tension in the system never zeroes out. There is always some residual tension and some stored energy. In muscles, this residual tension is not picked up by an EMG. In fact, EMG recording is a limited tool and shows activity only during the active phase of muscle increasing tension. And though anesthetized, recumbent, and standing persons may have considerably different muscle tone, their EMGs will look essentially the same, a burst of activity and then relatively flat. So muscle tone, no matter how great, is not recorded by an EMG. And although muscle tone may vary, a muscle is never slack. The idea depicted here that muscles can hang like a slackened rope are just nonsense. So if this tennis player, if standing still and maintaining a steady muscle tone, her EMG would be flat. So what keeps us from falling down? Muscles, of course, but I don't think they work quite the way you think they do. When you are standing, your center of mass is not perfectly aligned with your skeletal support and the point of pushback from the ground. You should then fall to the ground like a misaligned stack of blocks. We know that the joints are not stiff at all, but really quite floppy and loose, with the synovial joint even slippier than the best ball bearings. Joints supported by ligaments and fascia alone are limp. So let's focus in on the muscles. As Aristotle points out, the first order of business is stability. And the odds are high that resting muscle tone has a significant role in this. Since the early 1900s, we have known that muscles that span multiple joints may function as part of closed kinematic chains, and the muscles involved in those chains may remain isometric and isotonic. As we've already noted, isotonic muscles are hidden from the prying eyes of EMGs. We now understand that much of animal locomotion is dependent on closed kinematic chain mechanisms. Closed kinematic chain mechanisms are ubiquitous in biologic organisms. As shown in this illustrative model, locking one joint may lock up the whole kinematic chain. So muscle tone and closed kinematic chains could possibly stiffen the entire system, with only a flicker or two noted in the EMG. Since we would be a floppy mess without them, the main purpose of the muscles would be to stiffen the joints. Let us take a step back and try and understand the basic physiology of muscles. As kids, we all grew up knowing about muscles. In my day, we tried to emulate Charles Atlas, and then Arnold came along, setting a new standard. The forever model has been muscles are agonists and antagonists, and they shorten and lengthen. and movement is created by the muscles shortening and lengthening. As they shorten, they bulk up. As they extend, they thin out. Going backwards, say by powers of 10, muscles arise from muscle bundles, which arise from muscle fascicles, which arise from muscle fibers, which arise from muscle fibrils, which go back to the sarcomere, which, according to the sliding filament theory, is where the shortening and lengthening of the muscle occurs. This model is well and good for explaining concentric and eccentric contraction, but it runs into a serious snag when you're trying to explain the oxymoronically titled isometric contraction. Here is Arnold again, performing a so-called isometric contraction of all his torso muscles. Let's call it what it is, an auxitic expansion of his muscles. Let's try to clarify this. We think of muscles and most materials as getting thinner and longer when stretched, and shorter and thicker when compressed. Not to get too technical about it, they are said to have a positive Poisson's ratio. However, there is a group of matter that expand or contract in all dimensions simultaneously. And they have what is known as a negative Poisson's ratio. It seems to be more a property of the geometry and not of the basic material. The negative Poisson's ratio may enhance certain physical properties, such as density, stiffness, fracture toughness, energy absorption, and damping. And most germane to our purposes, it is a property of the tensegrity icosahedron, individually and in composite structures. Auxitic behavior has been described in tendon, skin, bone, collagen, and just about any collagenous tissue that has been studied with auxism in mind. And auxism gives us a whole new way of looking at the upright stance and all body postures, human or creatures. With each heartbeat, with each breath, the body expands auxitically. Let's check on Arnold again. He is performing an isometric expansion of his muscle. Not this, but this. The question then arises, how do muscles normally operate, conventionally or auxitically? In the lab, you can get muscles to behave with a positive Poisson's ratio. But we know that any shortening or lengthening of a muscle from its normal resting length only weakens the muscle. So shortening or lengthening a muscle, as in a concentric contraction, seems like something that should be avoided. As we have discussed previously, muscles working as part of closed kinematic chains may remain isometric, and closed kinematic chains may be linked together so the whole system can expand and contract auxitically. As you can see, it's a shape changer. With closed kinematic chains, there is no need for muscles to shorten or lengthen, and the four-bar mechanism is ubiquitous, as depicted here in the cruciate ligament of the knee, the jaw mechanism of a fish, the wings of birds, the stay mechanism of a horse, and the quadriceps and hamstring mechanism of humans, and probably any other ambulating creature. Not to change the subject, but the focus, this is cyclohexane, an industrial strength organic chemical that with only a bit of prompting can flip back and forth from solid to liquid and back again, phase changing at whim. And here is another example of phase changing occurring without great exchanges of heat.
What is silicone? Well, it's a real solid liquid. If you pull it so, it'll go forever, like taffy. But if you give it a sharp tug, it'll break like a biscuit. Now, when you make Silly Putty round and drop it, it'll bounce higher than a rubber ball.
Silly putty is a class of matter called soft condensed matter, or simply soft matter, that sits somewhere between liquid and solid. It can be pulled, pushed, and mushed about like a gel or soft clay, or rolled into a ball that could be squished or bounced.
Ball and bounce it.
You drop it, it'll bounce higher than a rubber ball.
Soft condensed matter has only been clearly recognized as a subset of matter since the 1970s. It is often associated with the ability to rapidly phase change in a variety of ways and under varying circumstances. We will skip the details for now. Biology is soft matter come alive. We are all soft matter. And as soft matter is noted for its phase-changing capabilities, we should expect no less in biologic tissues. Phase changing in biology was noted some 2,400 years ago, as noted by my colleague at that time. This instantaneous back and forth phase transformation is apparent in biologic structures almost any place you look for it. Here it is in mucin, the snot coming out of a kid's nose that can be soft and slimy and stretchy, but they may turn into shoe leather tough. So the hardening we see of muscle under a so-called contraction may actually be a phase change under an exotic expansion. So let's review what we know about muscles. Supposedly, muscles function by shortening or lengthening. Possibly, but that doesn't happen when they are part of closed kinematic chains. Supposedly, one muscle does one thing to one joint, but that is certainly not true when a muscle crosses more than one joint. Supposedly, muscles work as agonists or antagonists, and that too misrepresents how muscles normally function. And EMGs are a very limited tool that only lets you know when a muscle is actively increasing its tension. Now we know muscles are what pull you up, right? Here are the theoretical calculation of forces when a person is holding a 10 Newton weight, about 1 kilogram. That's about 10 apples. I picked this example because of the body posture. Note the compression force on a lumbar spine is 1,300 newtons, and that comes out to be about 1,300 apples, and that's equivalent to a force of 10 bushels of apples. And the dynamics of moving a body from sitting to standing would require even more force than just a static posture. You want proof? I'll give you proof. The standard muscle bone lever model is that muscles shorten and lever you up into the air. Now muscles are tension springs, and to pull it must have something stationary and fixed to pull against. If we are like marionettes being hauled into the sky, who is the guy pulling the strings? Don't tell me we are lifting ourselves from the ground by pulling on our bootstrap. The truth is, we are anchored to the ground by gravity, and muscles can only pull in and down. A less energy depleting solution would be interconnected closed kinematic chains, auxetically expanding and contracting, and changing the shape of the organism. And what would power this mechanism? The stored potential energy in the very springy bones which push up and out. We bounce up in the air, and falling in forward momentum keep us moving ahead. What is clear is that we know a lot less about muscles than we thought we did. What we do know is that muscles stiffen joints, and muscles are eccentric with a negative Poisson's ratio. They can bulk up and stiffen without shortening. Lombard's closed kinematic chains seem to be widely applicable. And the importance of phase change cannot be overemphasized. The material properties of soft matter like muscle are transactional, and depending what you ask of it, may undergo instantaneous transformations. It could behave like toothpaste squeezed from a tube, latex paint poured from a can, spring steel stiff, stiffening like cornstarch in water, or any variation of those. It is the structural organization, not the brute force of muscles, that maintain the organism's dynamical systems. So here is where we started, and now you understand why none of this is true. Okay.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much for the presentation. That's
Well,
amazing.
thank you for listening, and I'm sure there must be some questions.
Anyone has questions from the people online that want to?
Dr. Levin, what initiates the phase change?
The phase change is a property of the material. It's in biologic tissue is probably an accelerating force more than anything else, but it probably varies with the particular tissue.
So mechanical,
It's
chemical.
yeah, yeah. Phase change in the linear world usually has to do with heat. So you have to really get a lot of heat to change, say, from water to steam, or from going the other way down to ice. You have to, from ice to water to steam. Takes a lot of heat energy. So mostly, changing steel to liquid steel, it takes tremendous amount of heat energy. But in biologic systems, we do it with very little heat energy, and just like the silly putty works with accelerating forces. So if you accelerate the force, it gets hard, and if you approach it slowly, you could just pull it very gently and pull it apart. So it depends on the material you're playing with, just how it works. And probably it varies. As I said, under particular different circumstances, once it may be like toothpaste, and next minute it may be like spring steel or something else in between that we don't understand. The problem is you can't tell unless you test it under the exact circumstances, and that's never been done. So you don't know how hard your skin is when your foot hits the ground, when you're standing, walking, or running on it, because that skin may become much tougher at that particular instant of contact, and then milliseconds later revert to something that's something else. So we really do not have a really understanding of how tissue directly behaves. Now there are some things on it. So they've tested bone under different stresses, for instance, and it's clear that bone gets stronger under increasing stress. And collagen gets stiffer under increasing stress. But we can't tell that instant change. We don't see that instant change because nobody's ever tested for it.
Can I chip in?
Sure.
You know, it can be also temperature, even slight temperature, and it can be chemical. So in a rubber tree, my understanding from my research is that latex or whatever that is inside the tree is very fluid. But as soon as they cut the tree and it has exposure to air, it gets thicker. And so that's a chemical change, that it's reacting to whatever, whether it's the oxygen or something in the air, where all of a sudden it becomes gummy. But when it's on the inside, it's not. And so, and then of course, when you get to, I don't know if you've ever seen, there are videos online of frazzle ice. And in the spring in the mountains, when the ice is melting, there will be phase changes very quickly, because the ice is melting, the air is warming, the earth under it is warming, and all of a sudden it will something that seemed solid will start flowing, something that was flowing will then stop, and that's a very almost imperceptible temperature change, but there's a cascading effect that happens. So that happens when ice freezes as well. So one thing can trigger something else.
Thank you, Susan. Mariana? Go on, Mariana.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Levin. Beautiful as usual and fun to watch. To me, I still have these questions because I remember when I was first exploring with the oobleck, that instant face change, like, from hard to soft to, I was always thinking about the reactions that I see on the kids that I work with, how fast everything goes. And to me, like, it's definitely has to do with the soft matter quality of it. And I'm almost sure, I haven't proven this, but I'm almost sure that it's not neurologically controlled. Which I believe is what you're trying to explain there. There is a fun video that I watched once of a guy moving that is all plugged with electro how you call that, oh my god, electrodes to
Electrode.
sense. Yes. So, and those are connected to a piano. So as he's moving, the piano is playing, but it's not always playing, which means that there's times where they're off and he's still moving, right? So it's always interesting. And coming from a gait lab experience for many years, that the doctors were looking for the off of the muscles while the child is walking. Like there's still something happening there that we're not able to measure, right? So yes, very interesting. So thank you for that video, Dr. Levin.
I hope it helps. Muscles are, I mean, you will see that you'll continually use your old concepts of muscles all the time, even though you now know that they don't work that way. And I haven't figured out how to change it, frankly, because I do it too. But, you have to stop and rethink every once in a while when you say something. Well, those muscles aren't doing that. They're really behaving completely differently than the way I thought they did. And so you constantly have to rethink it.
I stopped saying the muscles contract. That I did.
Well, that's-
I now say the muscles are active. You activate your muscles. You use your muscle. But I would never say you contract your muscle anymore. That lesson I learned. Camila.
Go on, Camila.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I'm also, Mariana, I'm also sometimes struggling with it when I hear people talk about it like that. It's like, the contraction doesn't fit there so much. I am looking at thank you for the presentation, Steve. I love it. It's, as Nuno said, I think yesterday, it's like somehow this one clicks really good. What I'm curious about, or it's more like observation, that I see the traditional anatomy, the muscle anatomy that we are looking in those pictures is very inviting to the liver model and to be thinking like this. And what I'm wondering is, like, do you think it still brings us something when we look through the biotensegrity informed perspective? Or perhaps we should start also showing the body or talking about it more from a perspective of muscle fibers or some kind of different map, not map. Yeah, you know what I mean.
I think
Thanks.
map is probably a good term for it. I really haven't figured out how to do that. But you're right. We need to rethink how we do this. I take issue with the concept that we have center of rotation kind of thing. Except as yet, I do agree that in the center of the icosahedron is null. But movement at any joint and any human joint is really helical. It doesn't follow a straight line. It's not a hinge point. It moves helically. And that's not me. That's Punjabi wrote about that a lot, a bit about it. That all motion at any joint becomes helical. The and but they stay in relationship to one another because, like the cruciate ligaments, don't separate and disappear. Are part of this motion thing. So clearly, the femur is attached to the tibia. It's not that it's not linked in some way or other. And in the hip joint, there is a femoral ligament that goes from the apex of the femoral head into the acetabulum. The acetabulum itself is not perfectly round, neither is the femur, so there is a discontinuity in these two movements. And as Doug probably is trying to figure out, they move in relationship to another, but not necessarily focusing, point on point. In the shoulder joint, the that joint is actually pear-shaped. So as you raise your arm, the head of the femur drops down into the bottom of the pear. And if it did, that's why if it doesn't do that, that's when you get that impingement. So the treatment for that is to release it so it pops down into the lower part of the that joint capsule. So they're there. So you have to pay attention to the physical things that are going on, and yet at the same time you have to put them in a different concept. So it's really hard to do both at the same time. I mean, you really are thinking in two different directions at the same time. But if we have to figure out some way of doing it. The tensegrity model gets us there in a sense, but we haven't figured out completely how to put the structures into the model that make sense. Now, you do that with the pelvis, so you get a similar kind of thing, and it looks sort of like a pelvis and moves sort of like a pelvis, but you always have to keep that image in mind that it's nothing, they're really tensegrities interacting with one another. They're bubbles, bursting and changing the whole shape, but never completely separating from one another. I don't know if that helps.
It does,
Thank
and
you.
I'm thinking it's about developing the skill to move the same way as we move through the scales, to move through the lenses of like what we want to, what is useful to us, not just have one map, but like have all the colorful options that we can have. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that has always fascinated me are people who can sight read music, that they can look at these symbols on the page and hear the music from looking at these symbols. I mean, it just comes in their head and they know what it sounds like, which is, impossible for me to contemplate. But, I think we're going to have to get to that level of understanding when we look at body movement and things and see it into a tensegrity model. I don't know how you do that. I'm past the time. I'm past worrying about it, frankly. I just do what I can do. I'm amazed that I'm so pleased that I'm still able to put one of those little videos together. I think and they're fun for me, so it keeps my mind going.
Susan, you came on camera. You want to say something? I would like to make just one comment of something that for me was a haha moment in your video. I have never thought of the I lost the scale level of the CKCs inside them. So the muscle action happens as a result of a possibility CKC action, and then I can explain auxetic behavior instead of Poisson positive relation. Am I correct to think like that?
Yes, you can. And when I showed you the thing of Charles Atlas. Charles Atlas was when I was a kid. And so, we're talking, 90 years ago. He was very popular at that time, and the kids all did it because he had an ad at the back of every comic book, that you had. And his treatment, interesting enough, was dynamic tension, which is isometric contraction. I'm using the old term, isometric contraction of the muscles, isometric stiffening. And his whole program of muscle building was built on just making tension in your system and applying different models. That was his whole concept of doing it. He didn't have any weights or anything like that. It was very interesting that that's how he envisioned the body. And when I put him up, I said, "Oh my heavens, we're talking about something that is so foreign to the whole concept of how muscles work."
Yeah. Thank you. There's a comment.
I need to leave, so Mariana.
Okay, Mariana needs to leave. So anyone has anything else to comment, to say, to ask? Because Steve is there, ready to answer.
And if you want it translated, these two are here as well.
Yeah. Carol?
Yes, I'm eating my lunch because I have to get ready for the PT pod as well. But I've been here with you, and I loved Camilla's statement about how do we bring a new attention to movement, and then for Steve to say, excuse me. For Steve to say, a musician can look at notes on a paper and hear the music. That's the key. That's the key for us to be able to see the movement with the closed kinematic chains. The beasts on the beach help a lot to bring that concept to life, I think. But how do we frame it in such a way? I love the idea too of helical movement. I was saying that there's always a spiraling at joints, but I love the idea of the helical movement. That makes so much sense, Steve, when you said that the head of the femur is not perfectly spherical, and neither is the acetabulum. And so you're going to get this wiggle, this helical motion. Well, what difference does that make? Well, it really takes it out of the realm of cardinal planes beautifully and into the concept of the poetry of motion. So, I love all of it. I don't have anything exciting to add except appreciation for the way we've come to see this differently and still try to find language that's universally acceptable and accurate under all circumstances. And that's going to take decades, I think. But I don't think we should stop trying. And that's what I love about the group, because I always learn something new. I always pick up some new thing after all these years. And those are the things that I really appreciated about today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. Do we have,
Susan.
okay, Susan?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to echo Carol, and Steve says all movement is helical. And that's not only just all human movement. That's all plant movement. That's all movement. And that has to do with the fact that the helices, I think, self-emerge structurally. They when stuff self-assembles, there tend to be helical patterns that arise. Anybody who's made the tetrahelix or stacked the dice, grouped the 20-sided dice together, the icosahedrons. There are pictures of that in my book and stuff. The helices are everywhere. So the movement has to be helical.
It's also related to Fibonacci sequences too. It's the same thing. It's evolving through Fibonacci sequences. All these number things match, and they all come together in the tensegrity model.
Okay. This is very interesting. We could stay talking non-stop, but I think we have to move on if no one has.
Yes. We can have a close, or I can talk to Chris.
Okay, so I think Chris wants to add something.
Ask a question.
Go on.
So I have been, of course, after reading the superstability, am I talking to the right spot? Can you hear me okay? Oh, after reading the superstability paper and of course, pre-watching Steve's video, as you all know, I'm a swimmer, and I've been thinking about closed kinematic chains and swimming, also about how what we look for is what we find, how the models we're using are influencing our actions. And I'm not a lifelong swimmer. I never trained, but a lot of people, when you see them, they swim and they do this. They're trying to pull with their arms. They're trying to swim with their arms, but really it's the whole body. And so I'm thinking about each strike. I don't know what that's called. Where you put your hand in the water, it's coming from your whole body. And then trying to understand through closed kinematic chains. And one of the things that popped out for me today, because as we all know, every time we listen to this, something else comes into our awareness. But this phrase, that muscles, the job of muscles, that's not how you said it. The job of muscles is to stiffen joints. So if this muscle's not acting, and this structure will move a certain way, and then I do a contraction here. Suddenly, if this is stiff, now you've got a triangle there, and it's going to change everything. Is that coming the right direction, Steve?
As good as you can get.
Yeah. so that what's happening then, that something like that is happening to change my stroke from this to this, is that this is moving from one, because suddenly there's a stabilization. I know that wasn't the word I was supposed to use. Stiffening, a stabilization that comes from something that's going on that we probably never will know exactly what.
Coming from your belly center out to your fingertip. It's coming through your shoulder, but not from it.
Yeah. Yes, Carol.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, Susan. When you want to throw something and you do a deep bend to throw get the ground reaction force to help you have no ground reaction force as a swimmer.
Yeah, I know.
So you have to stretch, you have to really stretch through the whole of your side to use that as a counterforce against the water. And I taught swimming for years, and trying to get kids to do that, you get them to roll a little bit, on their side and really feel that stretch as they kick and then pull through the water. So it's getting them to focus on their body in a different way to give them that stability against which they can pull to get the elongation and then the stroke through the water.
And because everything's connected and because that helical motion is integral, you can actually float and then reach, and that roll happens.
Yeah.
If you point to where you're going.
Allow it to happen. Yeah.
If you allow it to happen. So these, as Nuno was saying earlier, these investigations into concepts open us up to different ways of exploring the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's for folks like us, it's quite interesting.
It's really fun, isn't it?
I'm right with you, Carol. I love the fact that I learn something every new.
I think the ground reaction force is still there, but it's distributed across the whole body and the water. You see, the whole body is...
Because gravity's still at work.
Yeah.
And then being in the water as well, that external force of the water from all directions is also contributing to the internal self-stress, which must be, I mean, I don't know if this is really true, but it seems like if I'm following through these concepts, then that shift in internal self-stress is also adding a little bit of energy into the bone springs.
That makes sense.
Yes.
So, bye. Thanks for coming, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Any last words on this?
I'll be back.
Okay. Well, we'll see you at the tea party. Any last words on this? Do you want to say something? I heard a breath. Yeah. No. Anybody here? Any last words from anybody out there on Zoom before we close? Do you guys want to come all close together?
Yes.
One of the things that was really striking for me, look, there's Kutu, hi Kutu, is that we are so lucky to be able to.
You can open your cameras, right?
Yeah, we invite you to open your cameras. We are still on YouTube, so if that's a problem for you, then keep them closed. But if you don't mind being on YouTube, we would love to see you. And I just want to say how special it is that we get together and hang out with you and have these sorts of conversations. And really, I have seen that this is what the biotensegrity community is about. This is how we are. And that's very, very special. Steve, you have made a real point of trying to avoid hierarchy. And I know I, for one, really appreciate that. And I see other people following suit. Susan, you're very much like that. Graham is, I think we're all like that. And some of us come to have a reaction to situations that are not like that. So today has really been, I think you feel that, right?
Yes.
So for all of us here and for all of you there, all of us together, this has been our first big Portugal, and thank you all. It's been very exciting. And we're going to take a break now and then join you at the tea party with, this time for me, it's not 10 in the morning. It's going to be 6 at night. And so what do they call it in Britain? Graham, is it a tipple or something like that? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Yes, a tipple is your favorite drink.
Okay, so we'll go and have a tipple then for the tea party for our toast today.
Yeah,
So
but you
thank
guys
y'all.
in Portugal, don't miss Afados. If you haven't been there yet, you got to take them to
Is there
Afados.
Fados here in
No,
Zimbra?
no. You got that.
But there is a a samba or something here
Yeah, but
tonight.
that's not Portuguese.
That's
Yes,
not
it's
Portuguese.
from
Oh,
Brazil.
that's Brazilian. Sorry, the foreigner here. Okay, bye. Thank you
Thank you very
all.
much. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you,
Thank you,
Bruna.
Oh, thank
Chris.
you,
Thank you,
guys.
Chris.
All of us together. It's not a Chris, it's a we. Bye, thanks.